Hi there, my name is Annaliese, and I'm about to tell you how my parents decided to give everything we ever had to my sister, while expecting me to keep paying for the life they built without me. I stayed silent, carrying burdens that were never mine, until the day a quiet discovery shattered everything. How could love turn so cold, so quietly? Before we dive in, tell me, have you ever been pushed aside by the people you trusted the most? Let's talk in the comments. The evening air was sharp, cutting through my coat as I pulled into my parents' driveway. Snow clung stubbornly to the edges of the pavement, Rochester's winter casting its long, familiar shadow. I hugged my jacket tighter around me, balancing a tin of cookies in one hand and a laptop bag in the other. Mom had asked for help organizing some old paperwork, something about the estate, insurance, all those things they had never seemed too concerned with before. Inside, the house smelled like a memory, lemon cleaner and a faint hint of fireplace smoke. I shook off the chill and followed Mom to the kitchen table, where she had piled a mountain of folders. Her voice was light, breezy, as if we were planning a vacation instead of sifting through the scaffolding of their lives. As I thumbed through worn manila folders, my hand caught on one labeled Estate Plan and Last Will. I hesitated, telling myself it was just part of the task. I slipped it open, and my world tilted. It was all there. Every bank account, the deed to the house, the retirement fund, all of it left to Marcy. A line at the bottom, "We love both of our daughters equally," read like a slap. The room shrank. I sat back clutching the papers, the ink swimming in my vision. I thought of the nights I stayed late fixing their broken heating, the years I covered grocery bills when Social Security ran short, the birthdays missed because I was patching their leaking roof. And for what? A pat on the head and a polite dismissal? My throat closed, but I forced myself to breathe. I rose slowly, the will trembling in my hand, and walked to the living room where Mom and Dad were sipping tea, the television murmuring some forgettable sitcom. "Is this how it is?" I asked, my voice even but slicing through the room. Mom's eyes widened. Dad sighed, as if I had inconvenienced him. "It's not what you think, sweetheart," Mom said quickly. "You're doing fine. Marcy?" She struggles more. We needed to make sure she'd be taken care of. I felt something inside me twist, then calcify. I laid the folder gently on the coffee table. "Good to know where I stand," I said. I didn't wait for them to answer. I grabbed my bag and walked into the cold night, each step crunching heavily against the frozen ground. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. Tears blurred the windshield, but I didn't turn on the wipers. I just drove, farther and farther away from the house that no longer felt like home. When the road became too much, I pulled over onto the shoulder, killing the engine. The world outside was silent, except for the whisper of snow settling over the empty fields. I thought betrayal would come loudly, with screaming matches and slammed doors. Turns out, sometimes it just whispers, when you least expect it. 2 days slipped by in a slow, heavy silence. Winter deepened its grip on Rochester, frosting windows, thickening the clouds until the sky felt too heavy to hold itself up. I sat curled on my couch, an old blanket pulled over my knees, scrolling through meaningless news headlines when the buzz of my phone startled me. It was a text from Mom, casual, like nothing had shifted between us. "Hey honey, could you help with the roof repairs? Just a small leak, but we can't really afford to wait." I stared at the screen. The words were plain, light even, but I could feel the weight of them pressing against my chest. No acknowledgement of the will, no mention of what I found. Just a new request, a new favor disguised as duty. Family sticks together. I could almost hear her saying it, in that gentle but firm tone she always used when she needed something. I set the phone face down on the coffee table, but its presence pulsed in the room like a heartbeat I couldn't ignore. The roof wasn't a small job. I knew that house. It was older than I was. Fixing it would cost thousands. Money I didn't have, money I didn't owe. Yet somehow, sitting there, I felt the familiar tug of obligation snaking its way around my throat. I picked the phone back up, scrolling to reread the message, searching for something, anything, that sounded like gratitude or understanding. There was none. When I didn't respond immediately, another message followed. If you can't help, we might have no choice but to sell the house. You know how much it means to all of us. There it was, the velvet-gloved threat. I stood up, pacing the living room in tight circles. The snow pressed against the windows like a silent crowd, watching me struggle. Memories flickered in my mind. Missed birthday dinners because I stayed late fixing their broken furnace. Holidays spent patching leaking pipes instead of making my own memories. Always the good daughter, always the fixer, always invisible. I thought of the times I needed them, when I was laid off after college, when my first apartment flooded, when I sat alone in an ER after a car accident, dialing their number and getting voicemail. Family sticks together, but only when it's convenient. The ache in my chest was almost tender now, like a bruise pressed too often. I realized I was standing still, clutching my phone so tightly that my fingers had gone white. I didn't text back. Instead, I sank onto the windowsill, watching fat snowflakes tumble against the glass. The world outside was muffled, muted, as if holding its breath with me. For the first time, I allowed the silence to sit between us. I let the guilt gnaw at me, but I didn't feed it. Maybe it was time to stop saving people who never tried to save me. I whispered it into the frosted glass, watching my breath fade into nothingness. And for once, I didn't feel guilty. Evenings had started to feel heavier in my apartment. The radiators clicked and groaned as they battled the January cold, and I found comfort in the white noise they provided. It helped drown out the thoughts that kept circling in my mind. I was really trying to settle into some sort of new routine, but the past clung to me like a second skin. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I froze before even looking. Part of me already knew. It was Mom. "Hi, sweetheart. Could you co-sign a small loan for us? Just some repairs we can't put off." The words blurred in front of my eyes. I pressed my palms against the cool surface of the counter. Repairs. Again, small things, just like always. Small until it wasn't. Just this once, until it became forever. For a moment, I imagined saying no. I imagined silence filling the space between us instead of me filling it with apologies and checks. But then the old reflex stirred. The need to be good, to be reliable, to be loved. I texted back, "Let me think about it." The guilt immediately pricked at me like tiny needles, even though my reply wasn't a refusal. Hours later, long after I had curled up under the worn quilt on my couch, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't from Mom. It was from Marcy, a picture. Her grinning in front of a banner that read "Future CEO Boot Camp," a caption underneath. "Thanks for believing in me, family." I sat up so fast the quilt slid to the floor. I scrolled up, rereading Mom's message. Just some repairs. No mention of funding Marcy's latest business dream. No mention of my name even. Just assumption, an invisible signature they thought they owned. The familiar tightness returned to my chest. I couldn't breathe. I scrolled further through the family group chat, finding more posts. Marcy showing off her new business laptop, a plane ticket to San Diego, and a shiny leather-bound notebook embossed with "Dream Big." And there I was, paying for it without ever being asked. It wasn't the first time. A slideshow of memories flipped through my mind with brutal clarity. The summer I skipped vacation to help pay Marcy's car repairs. The winter I maxed out my credit card to cover her tuition gap. The birthday dinners I canceled. The promotions I celebrated alone because family needed me. Needed what I could give. Always for family. Always a debt I never owed, but somehow had to pay. The realization was heavy. It pressed into my ribs and anchored itself there. For a long while, I sat in the dim light of my living room, the only sound the soft hiss of the radiator. The phone was still glowing on the couch, Marcy's smile burning into my retinas. Without thinking, I opened the group chat. Without hesitation, I pressed "Leave conversation." The silence afterward was shocking, vast, like someone had kicked open a door inside me I hadn't realized was locked. Maybe being the good daughter was never about loyalty. It was about staying silent. And maybe I was finally done being quiet. The snow crunched beneath my boots as I made my way up the walkway, grocery bags biting into my palms. The house looked different somehow. Lights brighter, a faint buzz of energy radiating from behind the front door. A tangle of colorful streamers fluttered weakly in the winter breeze, and for a moment, I wondered if I had forgotten a birthday. Inside, the air was warm, almost too warm. I peeled off my coat, glancing around. Balloons bobbed near the ceiling. The smell of baking cookies and fresh coffee masked something sour in the pit of my stomach. It was festive, but it felt wrong, forced. Marcy bounced into the kitchen, her cheeks flushed, a glass of sparkling cider in her hand. "Hey, you made it!" she chirped, grabbing one of the bags from me. "What's the occasion?" I asked, voice careful. She laughed, too loud, too brittle. "Just, family stuff, keeping traditions alive." Mom breezed by, kissing my cheek like I was a guest she barely remembered inviting. I set the bags on the counter and tried to ignore the knot tightening behind my ribs. As we made small talk, the conversation drifted from weather to neighbors to renovations, and then, as casually as breathing, Marcy said it. "Of course, the will was finalized years ago, way before any of this." The words dropped like ice into my bloodstream. I must have blinked, because Mom immediately jumped in with a bright laugh, waving her hand dismissively. "Oh, you know how Marcy exaggerates. We've been meaning to revisit everything, really." But I saw the flash in Mom's eyes. I heard the way Dad's fork scraped a little too hard against his plate. It wasn't new. It wasn't recent. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a plan. Later, as I loaded groceries into the fridge with mechanical motions, I heard it, a roar of laughter from the backyard. I paused, wiping my hands on a dish towel, and peeked out the window. There they were, a small gathering under the string lights, champagne glasses clinking, a homemade banner strung between the trees, a new beginning for Marcy. Congratulatory hugs, smiles that didn't strain at the edges, Marcy beaming in the center of it all, like a bride at her second chance wedding. And me, on the outside, always on the outside. The blood rushed to my ears. I dropped the towel and slipped out the front door without a sound, the night air slapping my cheeks awake. I sat in my car, keys forgotten in my lap, the laughter a distant hum muffled by frost-streaked windows. I thought about all the missed field trips, because Dad said we couldn't afford the fee. The prom dress I bought secondhand while Marcy got a custom one. The scholarships I fought tooth and nail for because no one offered to help. Marcy always shined because someone else was standing behind her, quietly holding up the mirror. And now they were giving her the house too. The house I helped fix. The house I kept standing. The house I no longer had any claim to. Not legally, not emotionally. My fingers brushed the ignition, but I didn't turn it. I sat there until the windshield frosted over, until the lights inside the house blurred into a smear of gold and shadow. It's funny how you can mourn people who are still alive. The sky hung low over Rochester, a dull slab of gray pressing against the town like a lid. Inside my apartment, the radiator clattered with uneven rhythms, and I buried myself in paperwork, pretending the growing pile was all that existed. I had grown good at pretending lately. The mail thunked against the door slot. A manila envelope slid across the floor. I hesitated, heart thudding, before setting my coffee down and retrieving it. The return address was familiar, my parents'. I opened it with a numb kind of dread. Inside, a series of invoices, electricity, water, property taxes, all addressed to me. No explanation. No accompanying letter. Just cold numbers marching across the pages. I sank onto the couch, scanning the papers again, as if the lines might shift into something kinder. A sticky note was attached to one of the bills, Lorraine's handwriting scrawled in her usual rushed script. "Just temporary until Marcy gets on her feet." I laughed. The sound cracked oddly in my empty living room. Temporary. Like every sacrifice I had made before was supposed to be temporary too. I texted Marcy, unable to hold the words inside anymore. "Why am I getting your house bills?" The reply came faster than I expected. "You live alone. You don't have real expenses like we do." I stared at the screen, rereading it until the letters blurred. My hands trembled slightly, not from sadness this time, but from a tight, simmering fury. No real expenses. Like my life, my dreams, my sleepless nights building a career meant nothing because I didn't have a family of my own. As if that justified turning me into a silent donor for their endless needs. I dropped the phone onto the table, feeling a hollowness bloom in my chest. In the fading light of the day, the walls of my apartment seemed to close in. I thought back to every unpaid internship I endured while working late shifts to cover rent. The scholarships I fought for because no one saved a college fund for me. The job offers I turned down because they would have taken me too far from home. Marcy never had to choose between her future and her family's comfort. That choice was always mine, and every time, I had chosen them. I saw now how lopsided that loyalty had always been. I opened my laptop, the screen illuminating the room with a cold, sterile glow. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long moment before I began drafting an email. Not filled with anger or demands, but simple, factual, effective immediately. I would no longer be financially responsible for any household expenses at the Harper residence. I read the words twice, 3 times. I hovered over the send button, my chest tightening. Maybe they had taught me loyalty all wrong. The snow fell in thick, silent sheets as I stood staring at my front door, Lorraine's voice still ringing in my ears. "It's just a little meeting, sweetheart. We all need to be on the same page." Something in her tone told me this wasn't a conversation. It was a summons. I drove through slush and biting winds back to the house I once thought was home. The porch light flickered as I approached, throwing long, broken shadows across the frozen lawn. Inside, the air was too warm, too sweet. Baking smells laced with something sharper, something wrong. Mom and Dad sat at the kitchen table, 2 mugs of untouched coffee in front of them, and a single folder laid neatly between. I didn't sit down. Lorraine smiled, wide and bright like a pageant queen. "We've just got a little paperwork to finalize," she said, sliding the folder toward me. Inside, a legal document outlining my responsibility for 10 years' worth of mortgage, taxes, maintenance, everything tied to the house. My signature at the bottom would make it binding. "Just a formality," Dad said, voice low and worn. I stared at the paper, the ink blurring as my heart pounded in my ears. No talk of what I had already given, no acknowledgement of the years, only expectation dressed as duty. When I didn't immediately reach for a pen, Lorraine's smile faltered. Her eyes grew moist. She reached across the table, her hand brushing mine. "You know," she said softly, "your father's health isn't what it used to be. The stress, it's been hard on him." Dad coughed weakly, almost on cue, though I remembered him moving furniture last weekend without complaint. The lie sat heavy between us, thick and ugly. I closed the folder and pushed it back toward her. "I need a moment," I said, my voice brittle. I wandered upstairs, my feet carrying me without thought to the room that had once been mine. The walls were still painted the same pale yellow, faded posters still clinging half-heartedly to the drywall. It smelled of dust and forgotten dreams. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, and let the memories wash over me. The girl who lived in this room once thought love was earned with compliance. That loyalty meant silence, that being good was enough to be seen. But that girl was dying. Every time I let guilt steer me, another piece of her withered away. I could feel her slipping through my fingers. Downstairs, the muffled clink of coffee cups punctuated the heavy silence. I heard Lorraine whisper something sharp and urgent. I didn't catch the words. I didn't need to. I stood, smoothing my hands over the worn quilt one last time. Back in the kitchen, Lorraine looked up, hope flickering briefly across her face. I didn't speak. I didn't explain. I simply laid the unsigned document neatly on the table, tucked the pen on top of it, and turned toward the door. The wind slapped against my cheeks as I stepped outside, but I welcomed the sting. It reminded me that I was still here, still breathing, still mine. Some wars are not fought with swords, but with signatures withheld. The glow of my phone was the only light in the room, the screen flickering against the falling snow outside. I scrolled without seeing, just trying to keep the silence from swallowing me whole. The world outside had gone still, buried under thick layers of white. A message popped up from Gideon, the neighbor who had always kept his distance but somehow saw more than he let on. "You might want to hear what your mother's been saying." My chest tightened. I didn't want to know. And yet, my thumb hovered, trembling slightly before opening the string of texts he forwarded. Snippets of conversations, neighbors' chatter, Lorraine's voice weaving through all of them like a venomous thread. Annaliese was always difficult, never grateful for what she had. Some kids just don't turn out right, no matter how much you give them. I sat there, feeling every word carve a new hollow inside me. It wasn't just disappointment. It was humiliation, a public stripping away of any dignity I thought I had left. Before I could fully process the sting of it, another notification blinked on my screen. Screenshots this time, from another neighbor. A text from Lorraine. "Marcy is the only real daughter I have." There it was, in black and white. No misunderstanding. No layers of, "but she meant well" to hide behind. I dropped the phone on the couch beside me, staring at the ceiling until it blurred into nothingness. For years, I had tried to earn my place, studying harder, working longer, showing up even when no one asked, carrying burdens no one thanked me for. And yet, all it took was a few typed words to erase me. I didn't cry. Not this time. Somewhere deep inside, something shifted. A quiet, seismic crack splitting open. I thought about every time I excused her silence, every time I let guilt anchor me to a life that was never truly mine. There, under the weight of 1,000 tiny betrayals, I realized I wasn't losing a mother. I was losing an illusion. Without thinking, I grabbed my phone. Fingers steady now, I scrolled to Mom's contact. Block. The screen flickered briefly, then returned to the home screen, blessedly blank. Some bridges don't burn. They rot until you realize you're the one still standing on them. The morning air felt like glass, brittle and sharp, as I opened my front door. A small brown package sat on the steps, dusted lightly with snow. No return address, no note. Just a quiet, ominous presence waiting for me to pick it up. I brought it inside with numb fingers, setting it carefully on the kitchen counter. The tape peeled away too easily. Inside, a collection of things. An old scarf, a chipped mug, the bracelet I had given Mom when I was 10 years old, now tarnished and carelessly tossed among the other discarded relics. They hadn't even bothered to wrap them. I sifted through the items, each one another small wound reopening. Gifts from years past, memories packed into a box and dropped without ceremony at my door. I could see it clearly now. Whatever love I thought was left had been sold off alongside my dignity. The phone buzzed against the counter, pulling me from the wreckage. A text from Marcy. "Cleaning house? Hope you're not too sentimental." No apology, no acknowledgement. Just a flippant dismissal of everything I had once clung to. I let the phone drop back onto the counter, the screen dimming to black. A hollow sort of calm settled over me, the kind that comes right before a storm finally breaks. Later that afternoon, another call came, Mom's name flashing on the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. Her voice was thick with tears. "We might lose the house, Annaliese, if we can't catch up on payments. We'll have to move. I don't know what we're going to do." The same voice that once dismissed me without a second thought now bent itself into desperation. And still, no apology, no acknowledgement of the wreckage they had left in their wake, just another expectation, another plea cloaked in guilt. "I can't," I said simply, the words tasting foreign but right in my mouth. Silence stretched between us like a canyon. Then she hung up. Minutes later, another message buzzed through. "Marcy, you're selfish. You abandoned your family just when we needed you most." I laughed, a sound that startled even me. Sharp, unapologetic. They had always expected me to carry the weight of their choices, their mistakes, their regrets, but they had never once tried to carry me. I stood at my window, watching as the last light of the day surrendered to the snow. The world blurred into shades of silver and gray, clean and merciless. I scrolled through my contacts list slowly, methodically, blocking one number after another until the list felt lighter. Freedom doesn't come wrapped in forgiveness. Sometimes it comes when you finally stop explaining yourself. The snow had started to melt into thin, dirty puddles along the sidewalks, and the air carried the damp, hesitant scent of early spring. I walked slowly through the park, my boots kicking up bits of slush, the world around me thawing inch by inch. It had been a few weeks since I severed the last threads binding me to them. The silence wasn't sharp anymore. It had settled, deep and vast, like a still lake at dawn. As I paused near the duck pond, my phone buzzed. Gideon's name flashed across the screen. I hesitated, then answered. "They put the house up for sale," he said without preamble. "It's not looking good. Roof's caving in. Yard's a mess. Nobody's been keeping up with it." I thanked him and hung up, staring at the muddy water reflecting a sky too heavy with clouds to be blue. The house I had spent years patching, paying for, preserving, crumbling without me. Russell and Lorraine had stopped attending church, stopped hosting their once grandiose holiday parties. Word was, Marcy had moved back in for a while, but left after too many fights and too few promises kept. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, all I felt was a detached kind of sadness, a grief for something that had never been real in the first place. At home, I checked my mailbox like I always did. A small part of me still foolish enough to hope for a letter, an apology, a crack in the silence. But it was always empty, just ads, bills, and silence. Sometimes unknown numbers would light up my phone. I never answered. I didn't need to hear the guilt or the blame or the empty words. Freedom had come at a cost. The cost of letting go of hope that things might ever be different. Slowly, life wove itself into new patterns. I started volunteering at the community center 2 streets over. I baked pies that cracked along the crust, planted flowers that refused to bloom in straight rows, painted canvases that no one would ever see. And yet, it felt good. It felt mine. I met people who didn't ask for pieces of me as proof of my loyalty. They asked for nothing but my presence, and that was enough. One evening, I sat on the porch of my small apartment, a cup of tea cooling in my hands, the streetlights flickering on, one by one like lazy fireflies. I thought about forgiveness, about closure, about the family I had left behind. Maybe true closure didn't exist. Maybe it wasn't about tying a neat bow around your pain. Maybe it was about living anyway, about laughing in kitchens that didn't hold old ghosts, about building something new with hands that had only ever been taught how to hold on. The scars would stay. I knew that now. But they didn't have to define me. Maybe some wounds never fully heal. Maybe they just become part of who you are. Life doesn't always give us the closure we expect. Sometimes the apology never comes, the understanding never arrives, and the people we loved choose not to see the damage they left behind. But healing isn't about them, it's about you. It's about standing up one day, even when your heart feels heavy, and choosing to live well despite it all. If there's anything I've learned, it's this. You don't have to carry every weight placed upon you. You have the right to put it down, to step away, to build a life free from the debts others never repaid. You deserve peace, even if you have to create it yourself. I wonder, have you ever had to walk away from someone you thought you could never live without? How did you find your peace? I would love to hear your stories and your thoughts in the comments. If you felt connected to this story, please type 1 inch in the comments or share where you're watching from. And if this video touched your heart, even in the smallest way, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapter in our journey together. Your story matters, and I can't wait to keep sharing this space with you.